This episode is brought to you by Mortgage Workflow Partners and the Mastering Encompass series, both for users as well as administrators. You can find out all the information about it over at masteringencompass.com. Also, if you'd like to check out what we're doing on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel using the @MasteringEncompass handle. And make sure you stay up to date on all the information, not just with podcasts, but also video content that we bring to you as often as possible. Now let's get on to the episode. Hey everybody, Larry Bailey here, bringing you another weekly community meeting. Thanks everybody for showing up. We meet every Tuesday at 4 o'clock Eastern here over at Mortgage Community, and I could not be happier to talk about this topic today. We're going to be talking about leveraging Encompass web tools, but over in desktop. Hi Luba, and this is an important conversation for me because when I work with a lot of clients right now, fortunately, more and more people are starting to discover web. And it's not because it's not been known to them. It's because there's been some confusion over what do you use Encompass Web for. A lot of folks are still thinking like you have to actually be in Encompass Web to use Encompass Web. And I wanted to, number one, provide some clarity on the subject. And number two, really show you what's going on. So today's community meeting is all about going through, again, what you should be thinking about when it comes to leveraging Encompass web tools and functions and functionality in your Encompass desktop. Earlier today, it was really exciting. We were talking to a company about automating their initial disclosures and how you can do that natively within Encompass. So super excited to talk about things like that. This is a community meeting, right? So if you're watching this live, thank you very much for coming, first of all. Second of all, use the chat functionality there, just like Luba did a moment ago. Feel free to ask questions, comments, suggestions. If you do want to talk through something, like maybe you've got something going on in your company, you want to explore it more, go ahead and let me know in chat. I'll invite you up as a speaker. All you need is a microphone. You don't have to come on camera if you're not comfortable doing that, but it is there for you. If you're watching this on replay, go ahead and enter any comments, suggestions, things like that. Wherever you're watching that, and we'll try and get you some information. So first of all, the very first thing that I was going to talk about here over in Encompass Web, let's go ahead and share a screen here. But the very first thing that I talk about is making sure you know where to go. A lot of folks go directly to Encompass Web settings through desktop, and although you can do it, it's not what I recommend, truthfully. It's okay for something like really quick, but truthfully, head over to encompass.ice.com. It's where you want to go. It is the most reliable place to go because it's where you can get to the waffle. So not only do you get the waffle, and the waffle, when you click that, you've got all different kinds of things here, right? Pipeline, opportunities, prospects. And if you haven't seen me walk through all of this before, feel free to check out the replays in the community or on our YouTube channel over at Mastering Encompass. And you can explore that some more. Kim says, I've had issues trying to access it through Encompass. Yeah, I haven't necessarily had issues. It just doesn't give you the clean UI. That's my big deal. The other thing that's really helpful here is this Encompass help is super clever because it knows where you are based upon your URL, right? And the user help that it gives you is deep. It doesn't cover everything, but it does get into some deep stuff with trying to remind you about things you should be thinking about. So that's another good reason to go to encompass.web. Last thing is just make sure you remember this is where you'll find what user account you're logged in with, as well as what instance ID you're logged onto. Also, if you wanted to check out what version that is, so this is kind of cool. It'll give you even more stuff up in here, your username as well as your company name, other stuff. All right, rocking. So let's talk about some tools because that's why we're here. We got some really good updates with the 24.2. One of the things that I wanted to draw your attention to is the scheduler. Now, I've been talking about this for it feels like a year. Finally, we got it working in 24.2, and we've gotten plenty of confirmation from different teams who have used Scheduler. I do want to bring up something really important in here. Scheduler templates allows you to create a clock. And so we know that Encompass Desktop doesn't know what today is. And so historically, you've had to use these third-party technologies to discover what today is, or even build third-party tech and sit it on a server or a machine outside of Encompass and always have it log in to kind of tell the loan files what today is, kind of a thing. So now you can actually go with Scheduler. I do want to bring up something really important that a lot of people don't understand or know about or have forgotten about. But when you're using a scheduler, you have to use workflow rules to both start the scheduler, and if you don't want the scheduler's completion to trigger something, stop the scheduler. So a good example is, let's say that you want to send out notification to the loan officer or the disclosure desk, if you've got a disclosure desk, that disclosure is due for the Bailey loan, and you want it to trigger off of 3142. So you're going to create a workflow rule that says when 3142 is no longer empty, so not is empty. In other words, it's got a date in there, right? 3142. You're going to start a scheduler, and the scheduler you'll start is send out initial disclosures. And you're going to send that notification template, which we'll talk about in a moment, to your disclosure team saying, hey, the Bailey loan still has to be disclosed by the second day. And if the loan wasn't disclosed by the second day, that the disclosure desk notification will go out, and then hopefully they'll do what they're supposed to do. But what if the loan was disclosed an hour after that scheduler started? You don't want that scheduler to still send out the notification, right? So you've got to create a workflow rule that basically says, if 3152, which is the initial disclosure sent date, the GFE initial sent date, if that is no longer empty, i.e. it's got a date in it, then you want the scheduler to be stopped. And so this is really important to understand that when you get into workflow rules, if I can click on the right thing here, when you get into workflow rules, you've got a result that your resulting action is to start a scheduler, but then you can also have a resulting action to cancel a scheduler. Really important. And these are things you can use in your desktop right now, because when it comes to notifications, one of the things that also you should start looking at is migrating your field triggers that create internal team member emails or external team member emails. You should move them to notification templates. And the one big reason why is because when you look at the sender configuration, I want you to pay attention to this. And if you haven't already shared this with your IT teams, please do that today. Using the DNS settings to configure outbound emails is far more reliable and secure than what you have today. Historically speaking, in your Encompass desktop settings, you've got your under contact management, you've got either Outlook selected or you've got SMTP selected. Hopefully not Outlook. Hopefully you do have SMTP, but your IT team really doesn't like SMTP for good reason. There are security flaws in that and security holes. So you can move all those to DNS settings and basically follow the configuration steps. Once you get your email address verified, you'll have the email go out. And then once they're verified, all of the notification templates that are sent, that you build in your templates here, will be sent via that email box. And so what's really nice is no longer do you have to worry about your team members having old Outlook, because we know that Encompass currently doesn't really like or use new Outlook. If you didn't know that, be aware. I use new Outlook, and every time I go to fire a business rule that fires an email off of standard field trigger, my old Outlook pops open, and yeah, it's fun. So remember that Encompass can't open up Outlook, so that leads to problems. And then number two, of course, if you've got these going out, not only can these go out to your internal team members, but they can go out to your external team members as well, right? You have your Encompass internal users and your external users. And the new Outlook, Angie, I got news for you. You're not going to have a choice in the not too distant future. So you better brush up on that new Outlook, Angie. All right, so when you come in here, something else that's really important with notification templates is just like we know on desktop, you can get this out to specific roles and those kinds of things. I sound different? Do I sound different? Is my mic all jacked up? Did I do something in here to cause the microphone to get jacked up? And it looks like, yep, my microphone. My microphone did its thing here where it completely lost the mic. So is it me? Am I completely gone? I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so I can see some of the microphone here. Sorry, guys, the microphone is gone, and we're going to go over here. So it's probably going to be a little bit different. It looks like my main mic decided to crap the bed, so sorry about that. Hopefully you guys can still hear me okay. Craig, I appreciate your vote of confidence. Okay. Yeah, it was, who knows what the hell technology is doing. So one of the things that I want you to take away from this is think about your schedulers, think about your notification templates. Those are things that you can use in desktop today. And all that brings me right into something that you absolutely have to start thinking about, which is workflow rules. Now, there's a thing out there called Workflow Engine. I know I was using that kind of phrasing historically, and Workflow Engine is actually what's running workflow rules. It's a little bit techy, but Workflow Engine is what's behind workflow rules and other service automations, things like that. So you want to make sure that when you think about workflow rules, let me go back to sharing screen because you guys can't see the screen. Obviously, it would be helpful if you could see that. So when we think about workflow rules, what I'm talking about is the things that you can do in here. First of all, as I shared earlier, the results of what you can do with workflow rules are to both start and stop a scheduler or cancel a scheduler. Really important to make sure that you understand how those things work. Another thing that's super clever is the ability to automatically assign roles. And so when we automatically assign a role, obviously if we pick, let's say we pick underwriter, right? And one of the things that you can do if that's the result of the triggering event, you can also then add in to send out a notification. So with workflow rules, remember, you can add up to 5 resulting actions in one rule. And so when I was talking to somebody else earlier today, we were really focusing in on, are we going to end up having this balloon of workflow rules because we have to create starts and stops and different paths? And it's true, I think we are going to see some kinds of rules grow. But I also see opportunities where we've got these desktop-based business rules that we're going to be able to consolidate into multiple actions resulting from a particular triggering event. So today, think about that when you're going through. So Chris asked, I'm not seeing the difference between a rule and a scheduler. Yeah. So a scheduler is a clock. Chris, great question, by the way. Thank you for asking. So if I wanted something to happen 7 days before closing, I'm going to create a scheduler, and now I have to say if I want my triggering event to start tracking the scheduler. Let's say it's the conditional approval, and when the conditional approval date is entered into Encompass, I want to start this scheduler looking for 7 days before field 763. And what I'm going to do with this scheduler is, once this scheduler completes, I'm going to send out a notification template to my team to say, hey, it's 7 days before closing, please make sure the ICD is sent out, right? That's a good example. But what if the ICD was sent out 10 days before closing? Do we want that to happen? That's why I was giving that example of building a workflow rule to both start the scheduler, as well as a workflow rule to send the notification on the 7th day before closing. And then also a workflow rule to make sure we cancel the scheduler if the ICD was already sent out. So Chris, is that helpful? Did that make sense? Please let me know. And so with the role assignment, again, one of the things that I find is helpful is you're automatically assigning the roles, even if it's to a queue. Like maybe you don't know who you're assigning it to, but you want to assign it to a queue, whether it's for processing or for underwriting or for closing, those kinds of things. And then that can send a notification out to a group to let them know that, hey, there's a loan in here, please go get it.
that kind of a thing. So automatic role assignments, big deal in workflow management. You can use in desktop today, right now. Something else that I've talked about a lot is enhanced conditions. Now I want to spend some time on this because the enhanced conditions project is tough for a lot of people, and I'm going to put myself in the camp of making it probably harder than it needs to be. Lube, I'm going to come back to your question in 1 second. So when it comes to enhanced conditions, remember that enhanced conditions are on desktop settings. So why am I talking about that when it comes to web and getting what's available? The reason why is because when it comes to enhanced conditions in web settings, you can apply the automation, and even if it's for a couple of conditions, it's worth it. Mostly because usually it's the couple of conditions that underwriting tends to forget, or data changes in the loan file after the underwriter already saw the first time, and now maybe they just overlook the fact that those conditions weren't addressed or weren't in there at all, because when the underwriter cleared to close, something in the file changed, and now that one condition that needs to be in there before closing isn't there anymore, or isn't there at all. So enhanced conditions in terms of things you should be thinking about today isn't just this all-encompassing, sorry for the pun, all-encompassing solution for getting to enhanced conditions because it's the next best thing. It's about leveraging the tools that are available for you in here. So Luba asked, to use a scheduler, do we need to be on the web doc viewer? No, you don't, Luba. And when you say web doc viewer, I'm really believing you mean new doc viewer, right? So for everybody else, old doc viewer is the mountain and the sun, right? The really old viewer is the paperclip, but hopefully nobody sees paperclips anymore. If you go to convert that paperclip file into an old doc viewer, that's a mountain and the sun. The new doc viewer is the page with a little green world symbol, looks like the internet. So the only time you need the new doc viewer is if you're going to use Encompass Web as an interface. So you can get to Encompass Web with old doc viewer, you just can't really use Encompass Web. So if you, by the way, if you go to Encompass Web right now and you do not have enhanced conditions, when you click on it'll just say documents. It won't even say eFolder, it'll say documents. You'll get a 403 error in the top right, and that just means you're not using enhanced conditions. Encompass, those that don't know web language, 403 just means a forbidden page. You can't get to it. And the reason why you can't get to the conditions is because you're using standard conditions, not enhanced. Long way around that one. All right. Some more things that I want to make sure you're thinking about and using when it comes to web tools is ordering services. So if we look at workflow rules, we've had a ton of people sign up to change their automation in services to automate things like flood or automate things like fraud. Really easy steps to make to go in and automate these things. So if you're not one of the folks that is automating services yet, start with flood. One client, literally, it saves them 8 minutes a file, which I did a post on this, ends up saving them like 15 grand or something like that, 15 grand a year. It took literally a few minutes to create it. So literally we came in, made sure flood was set up. I think they use CoreLogic. I'm not sure, but I think they use CoreLogic. Come over to workflow management, create a workflow rule, and go in and literally create whatever the trigger event. The result is ordering service, right? So I think I went by order service. And remember, to set up this down here, you have to have flood set up as automation first. So to do that, go to services management, go to automation rules, go to flood, and then click add and look for your service provider here. That's simple, no big deal. So automated services, we already talked about starting and canceling schedulers. So I would encourage you to look at that. And the last thing I will say is sending disclosures. So now you can send disclosures from desktop automatically. What does that mean in English? In English, what that means is that when you are ready to have disclosure sent, you create a workflow rule, and the resulting action is to send disclosures right here. Now, there's a lot that goes into this, right? I mean, let's not be naive. To automatically send disclosures, what that means is you have to, first of all, you have to have one-time passcode turned on. So if you don't have one-time passcode turned on yet, you need to open a case with ICE. Why do you want to do this? You want to create a case with ICE to convert to one-time passcode so that your teams no longer have to worry about the last 4 digits or the last 6 digits of the Social Security number. You no longer have to worry about the borrower's Social Security number coincidentally matching up with any other number sequence on the HTML email template that causes you to come up with some other authorization code. You no longer have to worry about making up authorization codes for your third parties to access the loan file through Loan Connect. And most of all, you give security to your borrowers. You put the security in their hands so that when they want to access their disclosures at their moment, only they have the code to make that connection and to view it. You're no longer on the hook for that. Angie asked, how are the one-time passcode to change over with users? Is it hard? I don't know, Angie, if that's what you're asking. Yeah, it is not hard. It is a setting. Here's where it gets complicated. If your communication with your borrowers is not clear on how this works, that's number one. Number two, if your company is not used to you putting mobile numbers in on your 1003, a little complicated. Another one is if your borrowers are using their work email address instead of their home email address, and they can't get to their work email address from home when they go to do their disclosures. These are weird one-offs. You might not align with these kinds of problems. Maybe you don't have this, which is great. But these are the kinds of things, Angie and others, that come up with one-time passcode. If you're not sure if this is for you, I totally respect that. Go into your testing environment, have ICE Mortgage Technology, turn it on for your testing environment and try it. I'm confident that you will find it's a much easier workflow for your teams and for your borrowers as a result. Again, the people that I've heard have problems are borrowers that, again, you don't put their mobile number in. Something else that you want to consider, again, you're only worrying about this for automated initial disclosures if you're using Consumer Connect. If you're using some other platform to deliver disclosures, this isn't for you. So if you're using Consumer Connect and you've got one-time passcode turned on, you have this ability for automated initial disclosures. Angie says what everybody feels, right? Change is always hard. So you have to establish the value. I've always found that if you can tell somebody what's in it for them, they'll find it and they agree that that's a positive. It's much easier for change. Borrowers don't know what they don't know. So if you don't tell them there's a change, they won't know. They'll just think it's that way. It is extraordinarily common for one-time passcodes to come to you. I deal with it in my own personal life at least 5 times to 10 times a week, where I log in someplace and they got to hit me with some type of code to get logged back in. Everybody's used to it at this point, for the most part. Okay, so one more thing on sending initial disclosures automatically. You don't have to do that through just a standard field. You can use a method to make sure the file is prepared. And so if you're interested in this, recently I was able to unwind a client from using a particular company's initial automation third-party solution and actually bake it into native functionality. So if there's anything I can ever do to help explain how that was done and have you leverage Encompass Native to be able to have your loan officers safely produce initial disclosures, or if you truly want to automate these initial disclosures, let me know, reach out to me directly. All right, last 3 things I want to talk about here. First thing is the Investor Connect when it comes to web settings. So this came up earlier. If you go to your pipeline view and you right mouse click on the pipeline and you select lender services, that's going to bring up Investor Connect. And so if you haven't been here recently, I would encourage you to check that out. Not only do you have investors, but you also have a warehouse, and you also have other services that are now available to go through there to deliver your loans directly from your pipeline through that. So it's no longer just Investor Connect, it's now Lender Services. So I would encourage you to check that out if you haven't done that recently. Next to last thing on here that I would talk about that's web-based, that actually is web UI, is the card-based input forms. So again, I think I showed this on a previous meeting, but I do want to drive this home. If you've got specific people in your workflow that can leverage something that is in an environment that they don't have to be in total Encompass desktop, you can leverage web-based Encompass Web with specific workflows. This is an example I built for loan officers to do a quick qual loan officers. But what I'm finding is more companies are finding these kinds of solutions to drive the user experience to be much cleaner, whether it's post-closing or appraisal desk or even initial disclosures, where you can build these quick, easy card-based forms. And again, if you look at application cards, you can drill down. Every time I show this to folks that are overwhelmed by desktop Encompass, this makes them feel at ease, which might sound weird by an LOS making people feel comfortable, but it does. And so being able to give somebody the opportunity to come through and get to a place that's easy to navigate, where you're still in Encompass, you're still in the loan file, but they can do their jobs. This is something I would, again, encourage you to explore. As you have any questions on this, get a hold, start a chat within the community here, and we'll be glad to share different ideas and different concepts and even different input forms, things like that. All right, last one before I run out of time. Candace says, I do love that card view. It took me a few seconds to adjust the first time I saw it, but I love it now. Still haven't gotten to the point of showing RLOs. That's great, Candace. So we just signed up for the ICE mortgage, for the ICE Experience 25. We have our booth there, and what's going to be really interesting is to see how much of this stuff is going to be at that show. So I'm super excited about that. Last thing I'll bring up is opportunities. Again, you don't have to be in desktop to use web tools. And if you're in sales or you're working with your sales team, if you haven't shown them opportunities yet to show them what it can do, you're missing out, and they're missing out, more importantly. So please make sure that you go through opportunities, show your sales team what's possible. Again, can you get into the loan file? Absolutely. Do you have to go into the loan file here? Not at all. You can simply create opportunities and have your sales team leverage those to keep the conversations going. That can turn into live files, just like this one here. So, this guy Larry was spoken to, and here's all his information, and then you can build out whatever the opportunities are for that particular bar with pricing that was live at that minute. So that's really, again, I wanted to spend this time with you today to really reinforce that, number one, you don't have to be using Encompass Web to take advantage of all the functionality that's in there. That's number one. And the biggest focus of this is it's all about the tools. It's not about where you are. And the second thing is to make sure that you're keeping up to date. This stuff is coming out at a very fast pace. We're going to see even more enhancements in 24.3, which is about the first week of December, which if you think about that, right, it's September right now, that's going to be around the corner, especially as other things are changing in the marketplace in terms of updates that are coming out, as well as just changes with investors and changes with service providers and you name it. So as you have opportunities to explore this, I'd encourage you to. As you have any questions, please make sure you leverage mortgage.community. And again, if there's any questions I can answer to you for you directly, please let me know. Speaking of which, you guys are always quiet as normal. Is there anything on here that I can show you before we end? Otherwise, I'll let you get back to your day. If you're not watching what we're doing in terms of the videos through mortgage.community, if you want to receive notifications, you can also head over to us and check us out over on YouTube over at Mastering Encompass. Sorry about the mic today. Hopefully it wasn't too much of a drag to listen to. I'll find out what's going on with the tech. And Candace asks, are there plans to add log entries with web notifications? Log entries, oh, you mean in the loan file, right, Candace? So this came up earlier today in the Mastering Encompass for admins. Amy Blum has volunteered to open the case. I'd always encourage you to open up a case with ICE too, because the more people that they hear from that they think there's a challenge with it, I would encourage you to do that. But as far as I know, it was actually supposed to be logging in the file, but it is not logging in the file from what we've seen, and I don't really know much more than that. So I encourage you, Candace, to follow up. I know I'm following up as well. So we'll see where that leads us. It's logging in web but not in desktop. If that's the case, Candace, thanks for pointing that out. So if it's logging in web, not in desktop, that tells me that that is going to be addressed very soon. Amy, that's an interesting thing, right? So my guess, anytime I see something happening in one environment, not the other, it's just in the middle of transition. As a reminder, sneak peek, the game plan still is for 24.3. We're going to see Encompass Web launching from desktop. So you have to go in there. And the last thing on here before we break is Automation Audit. So what Candace is talking about is if you go to Automation Audit Tool, you can go down to the sending notification as an example, and you can see the successes over here. So we'll see where that leads us. You guys are always great. Thank you very much for always coming to the live events, and hopefully this has been helpful for you. If you have any more questions or any more thoughts on this topic, please go ahead and post it. We'll get this replay up ASAP. You guys have a great rest of your day. Enjoy, and thank you for coming. We'll see you.